You know, I've tried to make this video for the better half of 2 years. I've made drafts of this video, many different scripts, and many trashed paragraphs that kinda just left me rambling on. What I found is I was never really able to fully articulate my words properly to where they don't sound robotic or too scripted. And in these many attempts, I figured I would just speak candidly. For a series that's so close to my heart, it just felt right to speak from the heart. You see, Berserk is what pushed me during a rather stressful and lonely time in my life. In a weird way, I have Berserk to thank for who I am today. Much of why I've been able to press on and grow into who I've become in the last 4 years I've been reading this series is due to the heavy nature that Berserk beautifully captures. And I wanted to speak on this beloved series in a way that does it justice. I wanted to make a personal note to what it really impacted in my life. So to me, it felt right to make this video to just say, thank you, Berserk. I was introduced to Berserk at a very odd time in my life. When I first tried getting into it, I remember trying to watch the first movie in the trilogy, but lost interest within the first 5 minutes and turned it off. A year later, the internet was hit with the devastating news of Kentaro Miura's passing. And in response, I remember there being an outpouring of love and support for the series. Fans from all over the world shared their profound gratitude for a series that helped them through some very tough times. For some of you watching, you may feel the same way. And honestly, I was blown away by the response. As previously mentioned, I couldn't understand the movie, so hearing this was completely foreign to me. It wasn't long after this, I met a friend who had the Brand of Sacrifice tattoo. I recognized the symbol on his neck, to which his eyes lit up to talk about the very series that just a few months prior, I couldn't see myself looking back into. He discussed the Berserk manga, and I was told about the many great things about the series. From hearing the praises of Berserk online, to seeing it myself in person, it was then that I knew something was truly special about this series. After much research and reading many articles proclaiming that Berserk is quote-unquote the greatest manga of all time, I finally decided to give the manga a chance. I ended up buying the very first deluxe edition volume and began reading that very night, unsure of what I was getting myself into. What I would go on to read that night was a world I didn't expect to get so immersed in. I was impressed by the artwork and the gore displayed from page to page. I had never seen or read anything quite like it. I remember my jaw dropping during some of the fights and the brutal nature of the world that it inhabits. The main character Guts and his brutal way of killing was something so badass and unapologetic. I couldn't stop reading it and just anticipating what would happen next. The sword he used and the arm that was a bow and arrow and then a cannon, then to see him take down a horde of skeletons and a giant lizard thing. I was hooked, to say the least. And I just couldn't understand Guts as a character at first, but I knew cheering him on felt right. I mean, he's like a medieval Batman. As badass as Guts is, it's clear that as you're reading, there's something he's struggling with internally, and I think that's what makes you initially sympathize with him, regardless of how much of a jackass he's being in the first arc. After completing the Black Swordsman arc and getting into the Golden Age arc, it becomes abundantly clear that this dude's been dealt a pretty messed up hand. I think that's what makes this story more real. Kentaro Mirua does an excellent job in getting you to feel for the characters of not only the Band of the Hawk, but as well as the group that Guts creates after the Conviction arc. Each character has their own set of problems and their own stories that resonate with the reader, and whether intentional or not, you sort of see yourself in the struggles of each character in some way or another, which again makes this series so much more beautiful. My impression of Berserk took a complete 180 after reading the Black Swordsman arc, but maybe it's even possible to say it took yet a couple 180s when reading the Golden Age arc. This arc really stuck to me upon my first read. I remember when I first got to it, I started to understand Guts as a character and the struggles that he internalized. This started to resonate with me heavily as I kinda had my own set of problems I was also internalizing. At this point of reading the series, I was setting off on a new chapter of my own life. I was moving out of my hometown to a place where I had no friends or connections. I was leaving a relationship that had bogged me down for many months prior, and I was doing it all alone. And upon entering my new life, I just felt lonely, and honestly, I was pretty terrified. My anxiety in this new situation I found myself in just felt crippling some nights. I remember how small and insignificant I felt during this period. I felt unseen by those around me, and I'd go days without saying a word to anyone. In light of the dark that clouded my head at the time was Berserk. Seeing Guts be a character that just embodies resilience and standing up to the face of uncertain odds felt liberating to me at the time. I felt myself chanting this mantra that I started honestly as a joke, "What would Guts do?" Which sounds dumb, I know. What started as a joke, I would tell myself to make myself laugh, became something that eventually pushed me to greater lengths. I began standing taller and making new friends and looking people in the eyes and seeing the world a little clearer. That's what I love about Berserk, but on the other hand, that's what I think people get wrong about Berserk. Berserk is more than a story about violence and fights and a messed up world. It's about perseverance and not giving up despite whatever life throws at you. As I've said, Guts embodies perseverance, and every character deals with their own set of problems. While I get the whole Sigma male gym bro aspect of Berserk being why it's gained popularity in the past year or so, I just believe Berserk wasn't made for that reason. Yes, it has many awesome fights and badass characters, but at the end of the day, under the surface layer, you have a story that captures human nature of forgiveness and the pursuit of revenge leading down a dark path. And not only that, but readers being able to relate to the scenarios the story represents is what I believe has gained its popularity initially, and why the series has remained relevant after its 35 plus years of publication. This is something that many fans of the series resonate with as well, which was a reoccurring theme in the early days of my research when first looking into Berserk. I'd seen so many examples of people saying how they relate to Guts and how his perseverance is what shaped many readers into who they are today. I finally understood where all of these fans were coming from. I love Berserk. More than just the story, but for what it also represents to me, how it's gotten me to where I am today. It's made me happier during many months of uncertainty and anxiety. I've met some of my closest friends to this day just based on our shared love for this amazing series. I've gone on to collect many Berserk related books and even got a tattoo as a token of my appreciation. I've made this video to tell my experience with Berserk and how it's grown to be more than a manga to me. It's reached me in a way that very few works of fiction ever have. So, again, all of this is just to say, thank you, Berserk.